I like the dog. It's friendly.
So I think this is the best costume for the day.
Okay.
And after you kissed me, I always used to wipe my mouth. Wipe my mouth!
I'm not going to be ignored, Dan.
Hello and welcome back to my channel Box Office Poison. If you're new here, my name is Moxie McMurder, and the other day I woke up with a piece of music in my head. Somewhere at the back of my mind I knew that it was from Shallow Grave, but just to be sure, I decided to check out a clip of the score on YouTube. To my utter surprise, the whole film is actually up on YouTube. Isn't that weird when that happens? I don't know why these things aren't flagged, but I was glad that it wasn't, because I thought, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, I've got nothing to do today, I might make a cup of coffee and watch the film.
And that's exactly how that shit went down!
I was also right, the music stuck in my head was in fact from Shallow Grave. It's been a few years since I last watched Shallow Grave, and I'm always surprised at how well it stands up, considering I know what's to come. Shallow Grave is the story of three friends played by Ewan McGregor, Christopher Eccleston and Kerry Fox. They're on the lookout for a new flatmate.
Hello, I've come about the room.
And after interviewing, or rather humiliating, potential candidates...
Well, are you comfortable, Cameron? Yes, thanks. Have you seen the flat? Yes. And you like it? Yes, it's great. Yes, it is, isn't it? And we all like it. The room's nice too, don't you think? Yes. Spacious, bright, well-appointed, all that sort of stuff. All that sort of crap. Well, yes. Yes, so tell me, Cameron, just tell me, because I'd like to know, what on earth could make you think we'd want to share a flat like this with someone like you? I mean, my first impressions, and they're rarely wrong, is that you have none of the qualities we normally seek from a prospective flatmate. Talking here about things like presence, charisma, style and charm, and I don't think we're asking too much. I don't think we're being unreasonable.
They meet one they like the look of and invite him to move in. When this new flatmate, Hugo, is found dead by an apparent overdose, they discover a suitcase full of money under his bed. The three flatmates are presented with a grim reality and an opportunity. I'm about to go into more detail about the film, so if you haven't seen Shallow Grave, pause this video and watch the film and then come back. Seriously, it's a great film and I don't want to spoil any of it for you. Shallow Grave is a character piece, and the three main characters, in what was unusual for the time, are pretty unlikable. They're the embodiment of middle-class privilege. They're arrogant and they're smug. Alex is a tabloid journalist. He's cocky, and even as Ewan himself says...
I mean, I just thought that Alex was the most fantastic character to play, colourful, sort of unlikable. He's a wanker, really, and there's a certain kind of person in Scotland or in Great Britain who's like that, who's a bit of a wanker.
Juliet is a doctor. She's calm and sensible and seems to be the balancing point between Alex's relentless arrogance and dominance and David's rigid, repressed identity. It's funny, when this film came out, and for a long time after, it was Alex and David who stood out in my mind the most. But now as an adult, I find that it's Juliet's character who's the most interesting and really stands out to me. David is an accountant, and if we were to work on assumptions, we'd guess that Alex being a tabloid journalist is probably somewhat immoral. Juliet, as a doctor, would have to take the Hippocratic Oath, and therefore we assume she's pretty moral. But David is something of a blank slate, perhaps a stand-in for the audience. Being an accountant will make us assume that he's logical, rational, and intelligent, but it really gives us no indication of his morality. So it's interesting to me that my take by the end of the film is that while David is the most changed and obviously messed up, I mean, he's actually murdered people, but Juliet is by far the most morally defunct. And I like that aspect a lot. But let's go back to the Sunset Boulevard-style beginning, where David, played by Christopher Eccleston, is narrating the scene and says,
Take trust, for instance, or friendship. These are the important things in life. These are the things that matter, that help you on your way. If you can't trust your friends, well, what then? What then?
On a first watch, you don't know what to expect from this opening, with the dance music from left field and these fast-tracked visuals. This was something that if you watched today, you wouldn't bat an eyelid at, but in 1994, things were a little different. In the early 90s, mainstream British film was well known for its merchant ivory output, the Bodice Rippers, and films like Howard's End, Four Weddings and a Funeral, Remains of the Day, that sort of thing. And they're great films, but film was changing, and the UK needed a new injection of energy and viewpoints. Shallow Grave is a great example of the films that helped to pave the way for British indie filmmakers who wanted to make something different. Pulp Fiction, Natural Born Killers, The Usual Suspects, Clerks, even good old Forrest Gump came out in 1994, and all of these films were changing the game, whether stylistically or in terms of storytelling, and this film being set in Scotland also helped to set it apart from other films from that year, and indeed that decade. Directed by Danny Boyle, Shallow Grave may in fact be set in the same universe as Trainspotting. As both films Keith Allen shows up in, he plays a drug dealer, and there's always a suitcase full of cash. Shallow Grave could work as a play. The majority of the film takes place in the flat, and what we're really looking at is the friendship between these three people and how it starts to fracture when money enters the picture. The rapid dialogue and black humour make it a fun watch despite the more grisly aspects. I love the way this film is shot and the colour palette that they used, especially in terms of the shots of Hugo's body. It looks like a Caravaggio painting or something like that. It's got an Italian Baroque feel with those deep rich colours, and the lighting, even how his body is lying, evokes a proper art house feel.
This is not an art movie.
No, this certainly is not an art movie, even though some of it might look suspiciously like one.
Danny Boyle admits to homaging Martin Scorsese's scene in Goodfellas. The red-lit scene of David sawing up the body mirrors that of Henry digging up the body of Billy Batts. It's a great scene, and it's an example of making you think you've seen more than you actually have. The violence in Shallow Grave is quick and brutal, but it never feels excessive. There are two henchman types who are looking for Hugo and the cash, slowly getting closer and closer to our protagonists. This sets David off in terms of his already fragile mental state. He seems to be the only one who's really trying to accept what he's done. Alex and Juliet are happy to carry on life as normal, just with more money. But David is consumed by guilt and it eats away at him, taking him to some very dark places. Eccleston really shines in this role. His descent into murder and madness is done so well, and his reserve making things that much creepier. David understands the true cost of their greed.
How much did you pay for this?
I don't know.
How much?
I don't know.
How much?
I can't remember.
How much? Tell me how much you paid for it.
I can't remember.
How much did you pay for this?
I don't know, David.
How much?
No idea.
How much did you
I don't
pay?
know.
I don't know. How much did you pay for this?
£500.
£500. You paid £500 for this.
That's what it costs, David.
No, that's what you paid for it. £500 is what you paid for it. We don't know how much it cost us yet.
Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. David's mental breakdown pushes his paranoia to the brink, but he's also not wrong to be paranoid. In fact, he's not paranoid. There are people out to get him, the two hitmen. As big as it is, and it is big, by the end of the film, the flat feels quite claustrophobic. It's honestly a great example of how a low budget doesn't mean that things have to look cheap. The set designer and dresser did a fantastic job of creating a space that feels real. Also, a lot of flats in places like Edinburgh and Glasgow have that TARDIS-like quality where they look small from the outside but are actually really spacious inside. The spiral staircase and its eye-shaped window are a metaphor for the impending descent into madness and paranoia. The film feels grounded as we watch the three main characters struggle with their choices and the inevitable reckoning that's coming their way. As Juliet takes up residence in the attic and starts spying on Alex and Juliet's every move, he's also taken charge of the money and hidden it from the others. His need for control, his paranoia, takes on such a creepy edge with this decision to move into the attic, and I just love the way it's shot with these almost bullet holes of light streaking across the darkness. And of course, I have to mention the marvellous Ken Stott as Detective Inspector McCall. It's perfect casting. The knowing intonation in his voice, his blunt questions, and a style that brings to mind Columbo is just a wonderful bit of character acting that helps make this film the gem that it is.
One thing.
Yes?
A watch.
What? The watch.
Is it real?
Or a fake?
Oh, no, it's a fake. I picked it up in Thailand. The second hand doesn't sweep, you see.
I see.
Right.
Tell you what. If you do remember these guys, maybe you could give me a phone on this number. Anytime you like.
Side note, the man sitting next to Inspector McCall is actually the writer of Shallow Grave, John Hodge. The end of the film is probably what sticks in people's minds the most, and it's such a great ending too. The ultimate fuck you, if you will. Despite all her manipulating, and Juliet is so manipulative, she gets screwed over by Alex. Alex knows that the suitcase David is leaving with does not in fact have the money in it. Juliet doesn't know this and so tries to persuade David to stay. If she had listened to Alex, things might have ended very differently. But as it is, David tries to leave. He gets into an argument with Juliet and he hits her. Alex, to his credit, is incensed by this and hits David back. After a very rough and tumble fight, during which David stabs Alex, pinning him to the kitchen floor, Juliet kills David. And because she's a terrible person, instead of helping Alex, she pushes the knife in further, pinning Alex even further into the wooden floorboard and leaving him, taking the suitcase with her. Juliet is manipulative. She knows the sexual power she holds over both men, and she uses it to her advantage. She even manages to get Hugo to answer the phone for her during their first meeting. Her scheming ultimately screws her over. She underestimates Alex, and now has nothing but a ticket to Rio de Janeiro. This ending is so deliciously twisted, and you can't help but smile along with Alex as we pan down to see the money hidden underneath the floorboards he's pinned to. Shallow Grave was the most commercially successful British film of 1995, and it's probably my favourite Danny Boyle film. Obviously, he's gone on to do Trainspotting, along with the same screenwriter John Hodge and producer Andrew MacDonald, once again putting Scotland on the big screen, which I'm always a fan of. Shallow Grave is something of a comfort film for me. I'm Scottish and I moved to England in 1994, and there's very little Scottish representation outside of Scotland, so I was always drawn to this film. Shallow Grave is a dark, fun, twisty thriller drama that I will always recommend, and if you haven't seen it for a while, I urge you to stick it on. It is up on YouTube. You won't regret revisiting this classic Scottish film. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any new content. If you really enjoyed this video, you can buy me a coffee, and I'll put the link for that below in the description. Have a great day, stay spooky.